Hi everyone. So today we're in the beautiful city of Oaxaca in Mexico, and today's coffee is from the Oaxaca region of Mexico. So this is a medium roast coffee, and as the name suggests, it's honey processed as opposed to washed or natural. This means the sticky honey-like substance called the mucilage, which is around the bean, is left on as it dries, which results in a sweeter tasting coffee. Now it's a really smooth coffee and it has a sweet tasting aroma, and you can really actually tell that it is a honey processed coffee. So today's book is Furious by T.R Ragan, and it was first published in 2016 and has a page count of approximately 317 pages. Now this is the first T.R Ragan book that I've read, and to be honest I didn't know anything about the author until I saw this book advertised online. I had a quick scan over the synopsis, and to be honest, it sounded like an interesting read and quite a fun read, so I thought, why not give it a shot? The book certainly had me captivated from the get-go. Now, T.R Ragan addresses some really harrowing issues in this book, things that I didn't really know much about, but they were thrust right at me from the get-go. Now, the story kicks off with quite a preposterous event as Faith McMahon stumbles into a scenario from hell which will change her life forever. She finds her children bound and gagged by masked men who are looking for it. Faith then tries to flee, but she is ultimately bound by the men too, where she then witnesses the savage murder of her husband and the kidnapping of her 2 children. The villains also think that they've killed Faith, but unfortunately for them, she survives. So when the police are predictably quite slow in dealing with the situation, Faith decides to take the law into her own hands, where, with the help of her family, she goes on a bit of a vigilante rampage to try and rescue her kidnapped children and avenge her husband's murder. Now, as the book progresses, there are shades of Liam Neeson in Taken or Denzel Washington in The Equalizer, which certainly makes it an action-packed novel. From being a gentle and kind elementary school teacher, Faith certainly did not expect to see herself thrust into the world of child trafficking a few weeks later. The book really does bring this disturbing topic to the fore, and it's action-packed from beginning to end. For me, it was a chilling reminder of the prevalence of child trafficking in society today, and it's something that I find a lot of us just really don't know anything about. Now, talking a bit about the character, the main character, the protagonist, is Faith McMahon, and she was an elementary school teacher, but that, for this book, is merely just backstory. From the moment we meet Faith, she is neck deep in immense suffering to an extent that I can't even imagine. Now, her character does start off with, as you'd expect, one of mourning and a lot of pain, but as the novel progresses, this wears off quite quickly. She rapidly becomes obsessed with finding her children to the extent that she'll let absolutely nobody get in her way. This is including law enforcement. Her mind and her emotions callous as she becomes hyper-focused on her one goal. This is evident in her demeanor and her overall nature, with the occasional volcanic eruption of temper as she feels like certain people might be impeding her investigation into finding her children. We quickly become used to this new Faith as the story bounces from one big event to the next. And to be honest, she's a character that I could only sympathize with given her dreadful plight. This sympathy stayed with me as the book went on, and to be honest, I struggled to come to grips with how somebody would cope with such a horrific ordeal. After Faith, the 2 characters we get to know the most are Beast and Rage, who are 2 friends she makes along the way. Their friendship blossoms as the story progresses, and we gradually get to know a little bit more about their backstory as well. We also acquaint ourselves at surface level with Faith's family, who are immensely supportive and also become heavily invested in finding Faith's two children. The story is set in the Sacramento area of Northern California, and the weather quite a lot of the time is miserable and gloomy, which is quite fitting with the depressing theme of the book. It gives a sort of eerie feel to the story, and while a small detail, I feel it does play a big role in setting the tone. As you'd expect from a book focusing on child trafficking, the tone is, for the most part, dark, and the writing is at times graphic. Faith makes discoveries as the book goes on that are quite frankly horrific, and they could easily have been given a lot more page time. Thankfully, Ragan kept these scenes quite short and snappy, and the book is going along at such a frantic pace that we don't have too much time to dwell on them. The writing style is simple, with short sentences, which along with a non-stop storyline makes this a very fast read. I actually finished it in a couple of days. Furious is a mixture of character and plot development, which makes it an interesting read, and the author doesn't delve too deeply into either of them and swings nicely between the two. Now talking about my general opinion of the book. Like I mentioned, I read this in a couple of days, and there were several times where I did struggle to put it down. I really enjoyed the intensity, and from what I can recall, there wasn't any single instance where I was bored of the story. There were several scenes that were hard to believe, and things that occurred just at the right time to keep the story ticking along quite nicely. This is not uncommon in such a book, but if it's in fitting with the story, it doesn't really bother me that much. That's the beauty of fiction, right? If I'm struggling to put a book down and really enjoying the story, then for me, that's a good read. I found myself desperately wanting to know what would happen next, despite there being a few plot flaws. Now, what didn't I like about Furious by T.R. Ragan? Well, like I mentioned, the contrived nature of some of the scenes did get a bit much at times, but to be honest, after reading the synopsis, this is the kind of story that I sort of expected. In addition, the roller coaster ride that Ragan takes us on does one or two corkscrews too many. Having serious impatience for a sequel is something I'm not necessarily a huge fan of, and Furious certainly left me with that feeling. If you read the book, you'll know what I mean. Now, in conclusion, this is a really tough topic to write about, but I think the author handles it really well. She provides us with a fun and engaging story while opening our eyes to the deep, dark, seedy world of child trafficking. I think we also get a telling insight into human nature, and while I have no idea how one would react in such a circumstance, there's one scene in the book that really stood out to me. So at one point, one of the child trafficking victims is grappling with her captor, and it is in public in front of lots of people. And what happens? Well, not much. The public continues going about their daily lives and try to pretend as if they haven't really seen what's happening. Is this really how most people would react in such a situation? I'm not sure, but it really made me think and reflect quite a lot. So for sheer entertainment value, I will give Furious by T.R. Ragan 5 beans. I did swither with 4 because of the author going overboard with cliffhangers, but for entertainment value, I think that trumps it, and I'll give it 5. If you come into this book expecting an over-the-top action thriller, which doesn't require too much brain power and constantly leaves you thinking what's going to happen next, then you won't be disappointed. If you don't like books that are a bit far-fetched at times, don't dive too deeply into character development, and go into harrowing, disturbing topics, then this may not be for you. If you think I've missed anything or have anything else to add, then please let me know in the comments. I would love to know what you think.